being here today. Okay, Colgate had a very ingenious advertising campaign, and if you would just take a moment, take a look at the two pictures. And generally, what I try to do is hide the pictures and then people say what they think, but you've already looked at them long enough. The point is that a majority of people don't see the fact that most people don't see the 3 arms and the 7 fingers. Well, the point is real simple. The point is that we're all using the same data sets, or mostly the same data sets, so how do we reconstruct those? How do we think about those a little bit differently? How do we see something that someone else hasn't seen? Well, there's a way to train yourself to do that. And one of my favorite quotes is from Elbridge Zentner-Gorod, the 1937 Nobel Prize winner for the discovery of vitamin C. He said, "Discovery consists of seeing what everybody has seen and thinking what nobody has thought." Well, it was really a play on words, you might say, because what he was really talking about is observing differently. Because when you observe differently, you can start to think differently. And so the number one fundamental is that training yourself to see differently really is the first step in rediscovering, because I think that's what we're doing. I talk about a golden age, but really I think we're in a kind of a, you go from golden to silver to bronze. I think we're getting into the silver age here of redevelopment, but it's going to be even more important that we take some of these ideas about being able to look at things differently, because now we're going in, we have a lot more data than we did before. So I want to briefly hit on, of course, I was brought up like all the rest of you in the scientific method, and what I wanted to do is introduce a different approach. There's other names for it. There's scientific ingenuity, that's another term you might see on the internet, but basically what I want to address here, just real briefly, there's an awful lot on this slide, is that the innovation method is one, and I'm going to show you a slide after this, that goes from the question to, it jumps to the concept or to the visualization, and then it reiterates back with subject matter experts. It is defined by focusing on the result versus process. The scientific method is very much attuned to answering a question. That's why analogs are so important. In the innovation method, the analog isn't important because you're creating the analog. It's a dynamic matrix. It's a different approach, a different way to look at it. And generally the outcome, historically, if you take a look at whether it's the Human Genome Project or the Brunelleschi's dome, it doesn't really make any difference. These were very much passionately pursued by people that were seeking breakthrough. And the scientific method is ideal for innovation, it's ideal for improvement, for progress, but you'll see there's really an end member. There is a continuum between the two of them. And I think it's important that we recognize this in our businesses, the way we're set up organically and organizationally, that on the exploration side, it's more of an entrepreneurial approach, and in the scientific method, we're dealing with reality. Well, they're both reality, but there's pluses and minuses to both, and there's different times when they're when they're going to give you the best value. So the innovation method drives discovery, and the scientific method really optimizes the result, at least in the Basinski space that I'm proposing here. So I want to give you a little bit of a slide here on the ACBs of innovative prospecting. Basically, again, there's a lot on the slide, but the way it works is that under the scientific method, we start with a issue, with a question, and then we go to the how. And if we can't get there, for instance, it has to have a vitrinite reflectance of 0.65 to produce flowable oil, and you've got the Woodford, and it's producing 500 barrels a day at 0.52 because the carriage kinetics are different. It took us a long time to figure that out. Well, then the question is, rather than using the RO of 0.6 or 8 or whatever it is, going back and getting the carriage kinetics themselves, rather than using a Barnett-based model from Rocky Val, going back and really taking a look at understanding what it is that these analogs are really telling you. And that's this matrix approach. So in the innovation method, what basically you start with is you start with a number of questions and a visualization. And I'm going to give you an example of the visualization. And then as I indicate here on the slide, you basically iterate back on what I call B. And that's where the subject matter experts come in. That's where all of your PhDs, all your guys, all your researchers, the guys that know everything, it's kind of like you've got the conductor, and then you've got all the musicians. Conductor has to understand where the thing is going, where the piece is going. And so it's that dynamic interplay. That's the teamwork. That's everything that we hear about. In the innovation space, though, it is basically starting with the idea and then with the three questions, why not, and what if. You work on what we call DOAs, ways to kill the project, this is going to sound weird, as fast as possible, or kill the idea as fast as possible. Because rather than getting all the information in the world about something, if you can figure out what the critical path is and then lay it to rest, it's like selling insurance or anything else. We all know about the prospect funnel. But we need to be able to do it in a different way, in an informed way. And that's basically the approach. And then when you do that with the subject matter experts, that's how you can get to these quantum jumps. So everyone's familiar with Edison and his 10,000 mistakes. Well, Basinski's got his 3 F's: fail fast, fail frequently, and fail smart. And learn all the time, and don't kill yourself in the process of learning, because we all know what the definition of insanity is. And so the key is passion, focusing on the result, and embracing failure, but the failure is titrated, and then consistently learning from it. And as John Masters, one of my heroes, pointed out back in the 90s, that as soon as you start to do this innovation, it's entering uncharted territory, and you're going to be a heretic. Very often, you're one of those guys, all right? But that just kind of goes with the territory. And the other part of it, though, is you can't buy your own BS, right? You have to have mental discipline. You have to be able to through the subject matter experts, make sure that you stay on point. So I talk about the ABC secret sauce models. Having worked in coal bed methane and for Burlington back in San Juan in the coal bed methane tax credit days, everyone with the 30 and 6 unit, everyone wanted a 30 and 6 unit. I mean, it had to have all these parameters, pressure and thick seams and all of this. But then years and years went by, and then we ended up finding these other things that were really very different, arguably quite economic. You always find what you're looking for. This is the limitation of using the scientific method, because it's analog based. In Barnett Shale, 2005, I remember very clearly, it had to be silica, it had to have fractures, it had to have RO of a certain amount, it had to have, at the time, this is an inconvenient truth, you may recall that we think that more than 50% of the gas is absorbed. Of course, now we don't believe that anymore, but that was the thing. That's what everyone believed. Well, as it turns out, we were kind of right, because it was associated with these nanotubes and this porosity in organic material, but it didn't have anything to do with absorption. So we have to understand that what we think, it's hard to know we have to understand what we think we know. It's just that. It's what we think we know, and it's about getting together with subject matter experts and then re-querying it with these 3 different questions. So the idea was that in 2005, there was a very simple question that we asked: why not something that's unfractured? Why not something that's a carbonate? And why not something that's liquids rich? It's about the opposite of Barnett. There's not a lot of people looking for it. So in 2005 at Burlington, we launched an effort to take a look at the Eagle Ford. We mapped a depositional thick behind the San Marcos Arch. And the amazing thing was, I didn't even know what the Eagle Ford was at the time. I went into a guy's office and I said, "What's the green stuff and the red stuff?" So there's the Austin Chalk and the Edwards Trend. I said, "Well, what's in between?" He said, "Nothing." I said, "Well," so I get an APG data pages. There's the Eagle Ford. Well, one thing leads to another. The one thing, though, that I discovered right away is that everyone already knew about the Eagle Ford. They knew it was full of oil everywhere you drilled. They knew all this stuff. I'm going, what a great place to look for a shale play, right in the middle of the kitchen. It's charged all this stuff. So the brilliant idea in innovation speak was focusing on the result. Well, geez, if we know it's there, how do we get it out? How do we define it? How big is it? Do we even care about it? So the next, let me go back. Sorry about that. So the idea was that, we've already talked about the Barnett model. We know what the parameters had to be. The play concept was really simple. I've worked around the world. The Turonian, I found out it was Turonian. I'm going, oh yeah, that's really terrific. Of course, we knew it was a known source for the chalk. It was ubiquitous. We're familiar with all this stuff. The one thing that I noticed, though, and it's something, because I've been doing, my first shale play was the Antrim in '85. I put together a pretty good position there. They ended up drilling a couple thousand wells on. But the high resource concentration is something that is a real big deal for me, and there's plenty of metrics that we've developed in order to be able to fine-tune that, to be able to compare plays. We came up with them as we were working at ConocoPhillips and our international unconventional group to be able to scope projects. But the real key idea was, guys, if we can characterize that this has even got a resource we care about, then we're going to have to do the shale cocktail. Back then it wasn't the shale cocktail. They were just kind of getting started with it, but it's going sideways and turning it into sugar cubes with massive hydraulic fracks. So basically what we did was we put together a little play, and then we chased both the distal facies of the Austin chalk based on the Anadarko and the production up to the north and east, pretty much on trend, and then the Eagle Ford. And one of the first slides we had was a difference with no distinction. The distal part, and they're really pretty similar. We ended up, by the middle of 2008, we had picked up 320,000 acres, and you see in the Carnes and DeWitt, because we put together this vapor phase model based on carriaging kinetics, tied it back to temperature. All the acreage was unlaced, but we kept it within about a 7-mile window, because the idea was we want to get liquids, but we want to take advantage of the supercritical phase, lower viscosity. We all know Darcy's flow. Of course, it only is responsible for probably less than half of the Eagle Ford now because of the nanotubes, but it was the principle. So in 2005, you see we have a little map over there from EIA over on the left side. And we started our little exploration program, and as you can see, there weren't an awful lot of wells in the Eagle Ford. Those two wells were the two cores. There were several wells, two of them were cores that we cut to get information, wireline cores. But then obviously we all know what happened by 2014. But the important thing is that in less than 5 years, we go from not one well to one of the biggest developments, oil and gas developments in the world. And that's using this crazy ACB space approach. So the early feedback was really important because, hey, you're working with a bunch of ABC guys. I'm one of them. I understand how they think. So what are they going to say? There's no analog, and it's been drilled for 50 years, and everyone's missed it? Come on. Yeah, you're some genius. They all missed it, and you know. Well, no, we already know it's there. So that's a great question, but it's not terribly material. At the time, there were no fractures. Well, we don't want fractures. The idea was rock mechanics are rock mechanics, and if the rock is brittle enough, if it has the right Young's and Poissons, if you can induce a fracture and you can maintain height growth, then the importance of secondary seals would be less, and that way you have the chance for elevated pore pressure, because too many natural fractures is your worst enemy. The biggest thing that I've found in shale plays is seals. At the end of the day, if you want to find a good shale play, look for seals, because most of them pole and fail. Most of these plays are either sub-economic or they're in the 80% because you've got seal issues. And so that's really really key. I don't want to go through this whole long list here, but basically one of the things that was fabulous was when ConocoPhillips bought us, we had a petrophysicist, we had a carbonate expert come back, and he, after 3 months of study, we had a core, and he said, well, the conclusion is real simple, that rock just can't produce. I've looked at carbonates around the world. This thing is a waste of money. This is a perfect ACB space approach. Well, the thing is, every one of those things we had to think about. We had to figure out an alternate, logical, reasonable answer, and without that, that would not have informed the play, that would not have allowed us to refine it and to really think it through the way we need to. So this is really valuable stuff. And so the result was that we ended up with a conventional play and basically an unconventional play that are both in the money today. So the tactics, we talked a little bit about the culture. Culture is huge, especially with what we're doing now. When we started this group, when ConocoPhillips bought Burlington, we had a small little group of people. I call them heretics because they very much thought about the world a little bit differently, present company included. But ConocoPhillips offered us long-term support, and we were able to keep this quiet for 3 years, even inside ConocoPhillips. We had a code name for it. MOBA didn't even know about it for a while. That was the whole idea. If anyone saw ConocoPhillips' name on anything in this trend, they would be leased like crazy. So we had to keep it very, very quiet. But the company supported us through thick and thin because it took 3 years. And we had a lot of ups and downs. But basically, we cut core, we used state-of-the-art approaches, we used kinetics, we used maximum burial temperatures. We did, Darrell Masterson was way ahead of his time in 2001 when he did his PhD on the petroleum system of the North Slope. I mean, this stuff is out there. This is stuff, but it's about putting it together. So learning from your mistakes, that was really huge. You make a big one, and then you get another idea, and the idea is either, hey, maybe we do need to kill this, or why hadn't we thought of this? So Basinski is the last thing I'm the end member of Einstein, but I love his quote, logic will get you from A to B, which is the scientific method, but imagination, which is the innovation system, will get you everywhere. So we all know what's going on now. The bottom line is that by redeveloping, by using this approach, which is a combination of expertise, of support, of good strategy, terrific people, and keeping your eye on the ball, we were able to create the largest organic netback in the entire play according to Wood Mac. We got $280 an acre. It's transacting at $45,000. But the thing is, guys, there's a lot more of these out there. I know everyone's going, oh, they're all found and all this stuff. All I can tell you is that's the reason why I've got this Bordeaux company, because there are more of them, and it's all about thinking about it differently and then understanding that the matrices and the analogs, we're very analog-based. We need to get into knowledge-based rather than just simple little rules. And if we can do that, then I think that's going to allow us to see differently, and then we can think differently. So back in the day, we had our special team of the amigos, and boy, there were a lot of people involved in this, and I want to thank them very, very much for all that they've done. They really were a crack team in more ways than one. This was one of our typical lunch meetings. We never missed a lunch. That was part of the culture. We would argue like brothers and sisters, dogs and cats, and we go have lunch. And then lastly, thank you very much for your time. Hey man, this is fun stuff. We really are still in a special time that we're writing the book. The world really is our oyster. Let's use what we've learned, and now we're getting to the next step where there's at least as much to find as we found, and probably quite a bit more. Thank you very much.
ACB.
Okay. Yeah.
We have. Thank you. So let's talk about the ACB for a moment.
Okay.
After seeing your talk at the Petroleum Club, by the way, Paul gave a similar version of this talk to Sipes, and the auditorium was packed. And after that talk, I got to thinking about, okay, if you begin with the end in mind, so we started looking at some of the projects that we had, that there had to be more exploration targets. So we made that our premise, and then we tried to figure out later how to get there.
Beautiful.
So do you have any other examples of ACV for us? Because it's...
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, when we started the International Unconventional Group in 2008 for ConocoPhillips, the goal was to find the biggest oil and gas field in the world, the biggest oil field that's a shale field in the world. I'm pretty sure we ended up doing it by using ACB. Everyone's heard about the Basinski, just about everyone has, certainly in Russia. About 1/3 of all of the advanced degree theses or whatever they call them there are addressed to Basinski, and it's just an amazing thing where for 50 years they have a single model, and they are just absolutely convinced that this play isn't going to work because of this single model. You can compare it to being analogous to what we understood about the Woodford in the 1970s. Well, we ended up putting together a very significant play. One thing led to another. Exxon ended up grabbing it. But I believe that, again, that we're starting with the end in mind, because everyone understands that that play is, well, it's not economic because it has to have this and has to have that and has to have something else. Well, the reality is it doesn't really need any of those things. That's just one example. I've got a project in Alaska right now, and the project in Alaska right now is on the North Slope. It's crazy. Basinski's been studying it for 5 years. I flew up there, bought the acreage. I'm pursuing something that I think is a very large opportunity, and it's just right in front of everyone. That's what I do, is I just work with stuff that everyone knows about and then just think about it a little bit differently. I think these things are everywhere, guys. They really are. I have a portfolio of over 2 billion barrels worth of stuff. Every one of them is doing the same thing. It's just, as you said, Charles, once you get started doing it, all of a sudden you start seeing different things. You start seeing 3 arms and 7 fingers. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
How do you sell ACB or suggestions on selling an ACB idea or project to ABC?
Boy, I'll tell you. After ConocoPhillips, I had a 2-year holiday in private equity, and boy, I understand that. I've been on my own now for 9 months. The way you do it, the way we did it at ConocoPhillips, and the only way you can really do it is you have to do exactly what we indicated on that slide, is you have to subject yourself to ruthless torture, but get the questions addressed. Because generally they're going to think that you're just an idiot and all of that, and that's fine, I pretty much am, but then address it. The way you sell this is by getting into their space and showing how it can work. That's the thing. And on the Alaska opportunity that I have, it's now 70 pages, the presentation. Tell everyone, when they're done. But you have to get into the ABC space in order to be able to sell it, which means if you haven't done your homework, you can't arm wave. The arm waving that I'm doing here is on the front end. But when you're actually out there trying to sell it, it has to fit all these criteria, because I'm not in the oil business, I'm in the money-making business. I've got shareholders, I've got fiduciary responsibilities. I love to talk about the ideas, but you got to get back into the ABC space, because that's what the street does and that's what everyone else does. But actually that's one of the advantages, because it makes you think about it even harder, because like John Master said, the most important thing is to know when it's time to just dump it. Thanks, that's a great question. Anyone else?
One more about culture. Tell us, you've created a great culture. How did that all come about?
Well, this is going to sound like a crazy story, but everyone wants to be part of, we're all tribal. Everyone wants to be part of something special. APG, EMD, car club, whatever. Everyone wants to be part. So I figured, well, if we're going to build a team, maybe the best thing we need to do is get a team room. We all know that, right? Well, ConocoPhillips was actually at Burlington at the time. ConocoPhillips had taken us over. The first step, Charles, and this is kind of an unconventional approach, was that, of course, I picked out the biggest room on the and all the floors we had and said, this is one we want. Of course, they were horrified by that. But then I said, we need to get a card reader where no one can get into the room. I don't care. I don't want Mulva. I don't want anyone in here. This is our tree house. Okay? Well, the problem was they had glass on either side of the door. And I said, but we can't put a card reader in there. I said, what do you mean you can't put a card reader in there? All you got to do is, no, what do you mean? Well, no, it's too expensive. Okay, well, that's fine. How expensive is it, Well, it went by month because the money's coming out of my budget. I got the P&L responsibility. They said, Paul, it took me 3 months, but it ended up being $27,000. And I said, this is great. The first day I had the team in there, I said, do you guys understand that we got a card reader out there for $27,000 and not a damn person can get in here but us? We are here, we're like SEAL Team 6. We're here to do something real damn special. We're going to find the biggest thing in the U.S. And now you're part of it. And hey, no one else can get in here. That's kind of the mentality that we did, where it's empowering people. And there's one other thing that we had where I go back to the 3 rules, the 3 Basinski rules. The performance evaluations are real simple. It's, hey, if you don't make at least 3 mistakes, forget it. You're a tiger. That's the reason why you're here. They can't be stupid. Everyone has to stack hands over it. We have to all agree that it's going to make some sense. But if you don't make those mistakes, you're not thinking, we're not going to get there. And here's the deal. When it goes wrong, because most of the time it will, it's my fault. Boy, that hurts sometimes. There was one guy who was a $10 million boo-boo, and I had to go to management. I said, Basinski, what the hell are you thinking about? I said, well, I just screwed up. But the thing was, I didn't really care, because what's the worst thing they can do? Is fire me. But I knew we were working for the right thing, and that's how you energize people, is you allow them to get into their space, do what they really do, have people define their own jobs, and then just go for it. That's the culture that we did, SEAL Team 6. Any other questions? Yeah?
What about education in our culture? We're very ABC driven. Any examples of ACB education going on?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, man, thank you for mentioning that. This is Christian in 1995. You may have heard of Christensen from Harvard, came out with this disruptive innovation. You've probably heard of that. Well, this disruptive, there's a disruptive everything. There's disruptive self, there's disruptive technology, well, the bottom line is this disruption thing is, I get Harvard Business Review every month. Just this last month, they had something on disrupting yourself. Disruption is what we're talking about. Disruption is about utilizing both the left and the right hemisphere of your brain. It's about, if you're a geologist, then go to the art museum. Study art. Study other things. Learn how other people think. Learn about history. And get more channels of your brain going. That's exactly what they're teaching at Sloan, at Harvard, at Wharton, Stanford. Hey, we are way behind. We're way behind. There's a company out of MIT called Attention Shifting. They go around to all the big companies and teach this kind of stuff. So, we have been so ingrained in this ABC thing for so long, and yet this is the next big thing, because we can't outwork China. I've been to China a whole bunch. There's an awful lot of people there. They're really smart. They really work hard. We have to go dig a little deeper in our toolbox and do a Steve Jobs. That's what we need to do. And that's what this is about, and that's what they're teaching in these business schools. So, great question.